Okay, we have Sherlock Holmes on the screen this morning because as we're going through 1 Timothy today we come to a mystery. Oh, you can't hardly read that, can you? So we're going to look at a mystery today, and we're going to unfold that mystery and see if we can sort of figure it out. And when Paul uses the word mystery, he's not really making mystery like Sherlock Holmes mystery. He's meaning something else. So we'll talk about that too, because it's kind of a cool deal. So here's where we are. We're in 1 Timothy. We're in chapter 3. So we are hip deep in 1 Timothy. And remember, 1 Timothy is just a letter that Paul wrote Timothy. Paul is probably, we're not sure, but it's probably somewhere in Macedonia, Greece. He's separated from Timothy, who's his apprentice. And Timothy is still in Ephesus, which is a western town in current day Turkey. And Timothy is trying to sort of make things stable in the young church there in Ephesus. So Paul's giving him hints in this letter. That's all this is. So he's giving him hints about how to do this in the local area. Don't leave until you confront some people, get things sort of stable. There's 1 Timothy and 2 Timothy, which is a continuation of that advice to Timothy. And then there's Titus, who's a different guy, who's doing the same thing but on the island of Crete. So those three comprise what we call the pastoral epistles, where Paul's trying to tell Timothy and Titus how you get the church on its legs well. So that's what we're eavesdropping on right here. So 1 Timothy 3, so this is what he's going to talk about, is this mystery. So I thought we'd think about mysteries for a second. And this is a mystery to me. Science would say it's not a mystery. They've got it all figured out. There's still some mystery even when the science is looked at. And Jesus refers to exactly this mystery right here in Mark 4. Jesus says, the kingdom of God is as if a man should scatter seed on the ground, and he sleeps, and he rises night and day, and the seed sprouts and grows, and he knows not how. Well, yes, you do. You throw seed in the ground, you put water on it, grows. Yeah, but how does that happen? So when he talks about this, the earth produces by itself, it seems like, first the blade, then the ear, then the full grain in the ear. So the farmer takes advantage of this truth, right? So it's not as though this mystery is completely unknown. He appreciates the mystery, but it's still kind of a mystery. I put seed in the ground, I put water on top of it. I know what's going to happen, but how does that all happen? I'm not sure, but I go to sleep at night and I wake up in the morning and look, it's sprouted. So that's kind of cool. Now, he's not saying it's a miracle necessarily, but what Jesus is saying is that the kingdom of God is sort of like that. We don't have time to talk about that completely. We know the results of it. We know the benefits of it. We see the evidence of it. But the workings behind the curtain, kind of a mystery. So that's what we're talking about today. The mystery Paul's talking about, like what Jesus is talking about, is something that is pretty well known in your current experience, but the workings behind the scenes, kind of crazy. So again, it's not like a murder mystery where you don't know who done it. And that's how we use the word mystery. Paul's talking about something that's been revealed already. You've got it, but not everyone has always got it, and not everyone still gets it. But a lot of us understand it, and we look at the content of it like sprouting seeds. And we go, "Wow, that's incredible! How's it work? I don't know." So that's what he's going to talk about this today. So that's our prototype for that. So before he gets to that, he's going to basically explain himself. This is what he should have put at the very beginning of the letter. Why am I writing? So he's going to write, why am I writing? So he says, I hope to come to you soon. See, he and Timothy are separated. Hope to come to you soon. But I'm writing these things to you so that if I delay, that is, there's a time delay between Paul and Timothy getting it. If I delay, you may know how one ought to behave in the household of God. So it's really pretty straightforward. I want to be where you are. I want to help the people in Ephesus where you are. But if there's a delay, I'm writing to you so you can start the process. And a lot of it has already transpired in the first 3 chapters. And there'll be more after this. But it's like this is Paul saying, do this, because if I was there, I would be doing this, do this. And what is it about? It's how you ought to behave. It's really how you ought to behave, what the church is supposed to be like, not just individually, but corporately as a church. And he says, look, you're dealing with a sacred thing. This is the household of God. The church is the household of God. Let me show you, he uses 3 things. It's the household of God, which is the church of the living God, a pillar and buttress of the truth. So he's telling Timothy, I would come and be with you, and we need to talk about how people need to behave in the church. But look how I'm talking about the church. It isn't just an organized organization. It's not an administrative entity, the church. The church is actually the household of God. That phrase, what did they use that phrase for in the first century? Usually, household of God. Family maybe. Out of a Jewish tradition, the temple. That was the household. That was God's house in that sense. So he's using a really consistent thing about the family of Christ now, which is the gathered family of Christ is now the new place, the place where God dwells. It's his house. And when you say household of somebody, it implies really strongly that when you say the household of somebody, that they own that house, right? If you come to my house for dinner, you come to the household of Jim and Dorothy, or maybe the household of Dorothy and Jim. Anyway, household says that you own the place and you can say what goes on there. So when he says household of God, he's talking about ownership. Right? And the one who says how things go. So he's saying really, it's almost a veiled warning. Be careful what you do because this is the household of God. Okay? Also, it's the church of the living God. And church, every time you see church in the New Testament, it's this word ecclesia. Exit. The exit sign starts with EX. X means out. Okay? So ek actually in ecclesia is out, and the Lycia part is called. So it's the called out ones is the church. Called out of what? The world. The called out ones. In fact, the word was used a lot in Greek, standard Greek secular culture. The ecclesia in standard Greek culture was if you had a town hall meeting in some village in Greece, Greek Macedonia. If you had some town hall meeting, you would have an ecclesia because people would call, we're going to have a meeting, and they would come out of their houses and they'd have a meeting. So it was a really common term. So when he says the church is the ecclesia, it's the called out ones. That's who we are. We're called out of this world basically and into his place. So that's who we are. We're the ecclesia of the living God, not the God who came and went and hoped things go well, but he actually lives and in our midst. And then this is interesting. The church is a pillar and a buttress of the truth. Not bad translations. Pillar, you know what a pillar is. Holds up the roof. That's a good translation. Pillar holds up. So the truth, in a sense, if you think of the truth as basically something that's being held up, the church is the ones that hold up the truth. And in a climate of secular wisdom, which is actually secular foolishness, we hold up something that's different than the world, and we hold that up. The second word, buttress, I've never seen this word before. It's fun to look this up. It's well, you know the flying buttresses on Notre Dame Cathedral? Those things on the outside that go down. You know, they hold up the walls, keep the walls from falling out is what they do, and they connect to the ground. This word literally means connected to the ground. Grounded in a sense. So I always think Notre Dame Cathedral, flying buttresses on the outside, but what it talks about is the fact that the truth which we're holding up as pillars, we're also connecting it to the ground. That's like the rubber meets the road, is the traction of it. So the way that the word actually applies to those who stand on the ground is what we're doing. That's the buttressing. So we make that connection between the truth and the ground where we all stand. So that's what he's saying. So it's a really important role. So all he's saying is that I'm going to come out and help you. And don't forget, this is about how you ought to behave. And by the way, don't second guess or underrate the church that you're there for. You're not just there to kind of herd cats around in the local, people. What you're there is because this is the church of the living God. So be careful about this. So that's why he's writing. And then after he writes this explanation, there's a pause in the writing right here. There's kind of and you can almost hear the gears turning in Paul's head right here. I mean, he just told you why he should write. He should have put this as verse 1. But after he says that, I'm writing to you so that you might know how you ought to behave. And he just told us last week about the behavior of deacons. Great people. Men and women, great people. Week before that, the ones who watch over the spiritual good of the church, the episcopes, we call them. So he's just told us about two classes of people who are just wonderful behavior. These are wonderful, blessing people that you'd love to have in your midst. And so Paul's talking about this behavior, and it just strikes him, and he has this sort of aha moment. So this is his aha moment in the middle of the thing. He kind of pauses right there. There's an actual picture of Paul, and he says, have you ever stopped to think about this? So he gets to this point where he goes, hey, wait a second. I've been writing to you to talk about how you ought to behave in this wonderful organization called the Church of the Living God. hey, have you thought about this for a second? So this is his pause. And the next word he's going to make is his pause as he steps back and he thinks about what he just said and what he has been saying about the behavior in the church. And this is what he says. Great indeed, we confess, is the mystery of godliness. How about that? I didn't have a clue what that meant first time I read it. I read that and go, I guess that's great. What? What? Now listen, if you're reading the Bible and you read something like that and you read past it and you go, what? You need to stop and look at it for a second. So I thought I knew what this phrase meant, but what I really understood about this was pretty weak. And in fact, it wasn't as enthusiastic. He's writing very enthusiastically right here. Because he says, look, great indeed. When he uses great, he's using this word mega. We use mega today. Great. He's saying, look, this is whoa. This is whoa. This is great. Well, I read this verse and I went, well, yeah, I guess it is. I don't know what you're talking about. Exactly. So we're actually going to spend most of the morning trying to figure out this phrase. Why? Well, because I think it goes over most of our heads. And there's a reason for that. But let me just pick at it a little bit, because Paul is very enthusiastic. This is incredible. He says, great indeed we confess. And when he says we confess, that right there in our vernacular means everyone agrees. So he's saying, look, this is an extraordinarily awesome, mega thing, and everybody agrees. Everybody agrees. You ask anybody, they'll say, whoa, yeah, mega. You think that's mega? Mega, right? So there's a lot of enthusiasm in that first opening phrase. But I don't know what he's enthusiastic about. I mean, really? What? Why is he so jazzed right here? Great indeed, mega indeed, everybody agrees. Ask anybody, is the mystery of godliness. Well, okay, I guess. So if that doesn't rev you up, then you don't understand what the mystery of godliness is. Me neither. So let's look at it more closely. Remember, I said the word mystery. In Greek, you're actually a Greek speaker right now if you use the word mystery, because in Greek the word is mysterion, which sounds like, a comic book character. Mysterion. But what it really means, again, it's this idea, it's not something that's hopelessly hidden, it's something that is actually quite revealed, but was not always revealed. And now you're going, oh, so it's like a gigantic aha discovery. I was trying to think, in our culture, is there anything in our culture that's close to that, that's like that? And the weakest thing I could come up with, well, it's not weak, it's the best, is this thing you see on the news. Breaking news. Breaking news. Well, when you hear the word breaking news, and they overuse it, they kind of manipulate it, but when you hear breaking news, there's two things happening here when they say breaking news. Number one, you don't know about this yet. And number two, but we're going to tell you. Okay? So breaking news is the whole idea that there's something that you don't know, but now we're going to unveil it to you, and we're all going to go, whoa, that's mega. Okay? So that's what he's talking about, breaking news. So it's not hopelessly hidden. And it doesn't mean you have to be like Sherlock Holmes to understand it. But it is true that what is now known wasn't always known. And that's why it's a mystery. It's a revealed mystery, something that's exciting to understand. So why is godliness that? And that's what when I read this, I thought, I am just not mega enthused about the revealed mystery of godliness. It just doesn't turn my crank. Anybody? So we got to figure this out. So we're going to do a little investigation to figure this out. He could have said the mystery of the Gentiles. And you guys who just did Ephesians, you came across this. We saw this tangentially in Colossians. What's the mystery of the Gentiles? Well, that the Gentiles are also included in salvation, not just the Jews. And Christianity, if you don't know, historically started as a sect of Judaism. So the presumption all along was, unless you're Jewish, you can't take part in what Jesus does for you. But then in the book of Acts, as the church is growing up, they go, whoa, wait a second. The Gentiles can. That's incredible. Breaking news. The Gentiles are in. See? And that wasn't always known. That was breaking news to Paul. So what Paul could have said here is, this is megas indeed, ask anybody. The Gentiles, the mystery. Wow. And everyone go, yeah, ask anybody. Yeah, but he doesn't say mystery of Gentiles. I would get enthusiastic if he said mystery of Gentiles. And we did when we saw it in Ephesians. He could have said mystery of Christ in us, because that's what he centers on in Colossians. And you go, yeah, that's incredible. That's mega. That's never been. You mean the Messiah is going to come and then actually live in you? No. Yes. No. Yes. No. Yes. Right? So that's breaking news. Messiah comes and he lives in you. Okay, I am enthusiastic, you can tell. I get enthusiastic about that. But he doesn't say the mystery of Christ in us. I get that one. He could have said the mystery of Christ, period. And that's what he just did last week when he talked about the mystery of Christ. Well, yeah, there's a lot of, whoa, breaking news about who Jesus is, which changes everything. He could have said that. That's a huge package. He doesn't say that. He doesn't say mystery of the cross, which would be I'd get enthusiastic about, or the mystery about the gospel, which I could get enthusiastic about, or he could say the mystery of grace, which I could get very enthusiastic about, or the mystery of faith, which was in 1 Timothy 3:9. I mean, I could get enthusiastic about all those things, but not mystery of godliness. Now, if you have the same problem I do, you need to stop and not just gloss over it. You need to stop and look at it. So what's the number one way we can figure out what this godliness is that Paul is so jazzed about? The best way to do it is to find out where this word is used in other places and just see how it's used in other places so we can get an idea. So, before you go, you think, well, we could take some guesses. Is godliness just looking like God? I don't know. There's something about God as something about God. I don't really know. So let's find out. And we're in luck because it's one of his favorite words in 1 Timothy. He'll use it 7 times in 1 Timothy. So, and there's a lot of use outside of 1 Timothy, but this is the pot of gold for godliness. So we're going to look at those. There are other places. I'll mention a couple of those. But this is where if you've got Bible software, this is a great use of Bible software. I got to encourage you to do that. You don't even have to buy the software. Some of it's online, Bible Hub or Blue Letter Bible. And you can look at this verse. You can click on that word godliness. You can find out what Greek word it is. And you'll know it by the end of today, because I'll say it 100 times. Click on that word and then find out everywhere it's used and then go visit them one at a time and read it. And that's all I did. This is not any mystery. That's all I did. So let's take a look. So godliness shows up in so many places. Here's a bunch of the 1 Timothy ones. We already looked at one of them when he talks about praying for people. Pray for kings and all who are in high positions, that we may lead a peaceful and quiet life, godly and dignified in every way. Eusebia, that's the word right there in Greek. You all read Greek, right? Eusebia, okay? Eusebia. So it sounds like something that you do in your life. Right? So pray for people in power so that you can live a certain kind of life. And that kind of life you'd like to live is a quiet life that's godly and dignified in every way. So clue number 1 is godliness is something about how you live as a believer. See how hard this is? Somehow, let's look at another one. 1 Timothy 4, we haven't gotten to this yet. Have nothing to do with irreverent, silly myths. Rather, train yourself for Eusebia, for godliness. Train yourself for it. So it is some kind of behavior, but you can actually train yourself for it. For while bodily training is of some value, godliness, Eusebia, is of value in every way as it holds promise for the present life and also for the life to come. Okay, so it seems to be something we do, something that's a tenet about how we live our life, and it seems to be something you can sort of encourage in your life. Okay? Gathering the clues? We're getting out we're doing the Sherlock Holmes thing. Okay, so let's try another one. Later on in 1 Timothy 6, if anyone teaches a different doctrine and does not agree with the sound words of our Lord Jesus Christ and the teaching that accords with Eusebia. So teaching, so you can be taught godliness. And many times when you go into false doctrine, godliness falls by the way. That's a victim of false doctrine. So there's something about how we live life in a routine way that you can train for, you can aim toward, and also it's part of knowing the right things. And false doctrine will mess you up on that. Okay? Building it? Let's see what else we got. So 1 Timothy 6:5, right after that. This is interesting, and you're going to have a lot of questions we'll answer when we get there. and constant friction among people who are depraved in mind and deprived of the truth, imagining that godliness is a means of gain. So if godliness is kind of in the general category of our behavior, then what he's saying, although we'll check it when we get there in a couple of weeks, what he's saying is that some people are applying this behavior to their life and thinking that somehow they're gaining from it. So hold that question. That's an interesting thing. And he follows up immediately after that, the next verse. But godliness, Eusebia, with contentment is great gain. Oh, Paul, so is it gain or not gain? I mean, come on, you're just messing with me. Well, I left a lot of words out in these two verses, so we'll look at it when we get to 6. But someone's trying to gain or somehow do something to gain something by looking Eusebius, but they're not actually Eusebius. But if you take Eusebia and you put it to contentment, then that is gain. Oh, what? But we're still in the whole category of behavior somehow. And it looks like from this verse, behavior that people try and fake for gain. Okay, is there more? Well, yes, there is. I told you, Paul loves this. 1 Timothy 6, but as for you, O man of God, flee these things that he talked about. Instead, pursue righteousness, godliness, faith, love, steadfastness, gentleness. That's an interesting list. So if you're thinking that godliness is the same as righteousness, it's not, because Paul used them both in the sentence, meaning slightly different things. So godliness, Eusebia, is something about behavior. Righteousness is about behavior as well. Righteousness goes larger than behavior. It also includes your motivations of your heart. Things like hatred and love would be included in the righteousness category. But Eusebia, it has something to do with behavior that you can train towards, that you can try and fake for gain, that you can pursue. It's not righteousness. It's not faith or love necessarily, but it's still something about you now in behavior. Okay? We need more clues. We'll get some more clues. We go back, here it is. It's Eusebia. And if you just take the word apart, the you part means well, and the Sebia means worship. Really? Yeah. So, for instance, the you, it looks like if you were going to transliterate in English, it'd be EU, the letters EU. And that's actually used as a single standalone word many times in the Greek. So you, unfortunately, means good. Oh, that's just not specific enough. Okay, it's not that kind of good. It's the kind of good that talks about the benefit to you. So if someone asks you, how are you, you can say, I'm well. It's really more well. You always applies to the goodness that talks about your health, your wellness. So whenever I see the word you there, I think wellness, something that's good for me is wellness. So I translate it well. And the Sebia part is, it's literally worship. Sibo is worship. It's worship. So is it well worship? No. But the contraction together makes an interesting idea. And this is where we need to flesh this out as we look through even secular Greek. This whole word Eusebia is a state of wellness that results from a lifestyle infused with the worship of God. You know where I got that? I made it up. But it's what he's talking about. It's the conflation of the idea of what's really good for you, what brings well-being to you, is connected, integrated into your daily worship of God. Okay, now we're getting someplace. Because what it means basically is if you want to live, like the psalmist says, a long life, you need to do something on a daily basis. You need to actually integrate into your life more than, for instance, worshiping God on Sundays. You need to somehow incorporate into every minute and hour of your life a life that worships God as it moves along. And then God's intention for how well-being from his design is meant to be actually results from that. Okay? Let me add another one, because this is just hard to capture. It's an intentional focus on God's best for us because his goal is our wellness. And this is the sense in which you can pursue or train toward it. It's a way of saying as you walk through life, and life offers different options of things to take part in, and you say, well, I can do that, and it offers life, But you know what? It's also in opposition to what God says to me will bring life. So maybe I need to pursue what God thinks is good for me rather than this thing that promises good because I'm suspicious of that. Now, if you've lived life long enough, you understand that you can make that decision poorly over and over again. Things will present itself to you, and you'll say, hey, I think I better get involved in that because that's going to bring life. I want muscle cars. Those will make me feel great about life, you know? And then you dump all of your gold into this stuff. You invest in it highly, and for a while it's kind of a sizzle, but then after a while it just kind of, and there's nothing in it. Worse yet, it can actually drag you into not well living, but bad living. And there's a lot of those avenues in life that we know about too, and drugs and stuff like that are a lot of those. So there are avenues in life that you can pursue that promise up front well-being. You'll be more well because you're involved in this, but they don't. They're a lie. And so this is actively saying, but God understands what will bring well-being into your life, and he loves you tremendously. Why don't you trust what he's recommending? That's what we're talking about here. So the Eusebius is well-being and worshiping God actively in every moment. Okay? Those are coupled together. Yeah, Doug.
I think it's interesting that it says in Genesis we were created in the image of God.
Yeah, created in his image.
This is the completion of it.
Exactly. This is somehow that coming back together. God knows that the best for us is relationship with him. It was in the garden. They walked in the cool of the day. You know, it was a relationship with God. There's something that's in our best, made by the designer who created us, that relies on restored relationship with this God. So that's what we're talking about. But if you deny that God exists, it's going to break the mold. So that's why this word Eusebia is nice, because it means your well-being is designed to follow from your worship of the God who loves you and has great intentions for you. That's what this package is. Yeah, Larry.
Does sanctification relate to this?
Sanctification's a little different, but it's part of it, okay? Sanctification is the idea of you gradually changing, and I think, as we'll see near the end, it actually is, it's a significant part of it. It's not all of it, but it's a significant part of it. Yeah, exactly. But this does come down to the idea that if you want to pursue and train yourself for your well-being, somehow that's hidden in your right relationship with God, which is worship-oriented. That's what this word is saying. There's one more summary here. It's just hard to capture. It's a responsive involvement in God's love for us, which includes thankfulness and contentment and overflow out of your life to other people. So it seems like a vague word, but it's a $1 million word, which is why Paul used it 7 times in 1 Timothy. Eusebius, it seems like it's the entire package idea of what it means for wellness in your life as you walk in worship of God himself. Yeah. Now, righteousness stems from kind of a legal perspective, a legal world. The word righteousness, it means right standing. It means not disobeying the law. The law is meant by God to be our good, for one thing. So it does overlap a little bit. But righteousness talks about doing good and doing bad, and yes, you should or you shouldn't, and a lot of those things, which are actually quite good for you. But Eusebius is a much bigger word. It's not about what you should and shouldn't do. It's about the fact that life, you find well-being in the present worship of God in every context. That it's your best. This is your best. This is your best. Righteousness sort of captures that in a way too, because God delineates what is your best. But Eusebia is the result of that in your life. The result is, as I walk with Christ on a daily basis, I'm well. That's Eusebia. Isn't that a great word? I mean, it really is. It's the benefit to your life right now of following Christ. Not just in the future, but like right now. It's the entire package of the wellness that comes from being with Christ now. And the wellness that he brings when you give your life to him. I mean, we'll keep talking about, but it's such a great thing. So when Paul says you can pursue a lot of stuff, don't pursue the lot of stuff. Pursue Eusebia. Pursue the fact that your wellness is hidden in your worship of God. You can do all these other things. You can train your body to be strong and powerful. If you're going to train yourself to pursue God, and in that comes Eusebia, comes wellness. That's what he's trying to say. So you can participate in the process, but there's one more hitch to it before we keep going. in this world that we live in, there are so many competing voices for things that'll make us Eusebius, that'll make us well, that are wrong. That is a constant battle, and we don't always win the battle in making choices to train ourselves to pursue God's best for us rather than, Hollywood's best for us or someone's best for us. We don't always win it. It's really a battle. It's really a battle, and it's a battle that we're sort of out of power for completely. We can do some, we can pursue and we can train, but we can do some, but still, oh man, there's scars because of bad choices I've made and these choices that continue to come on. So there is a sense when you look at this because of where we live, that this Eusebius is something, although I want to push toward that, I want to push toward the fact that my wellness is hidden in my relationship with God, but I don't always do that. And I wished I could do that more, okay? Because after all, the answer to your wellness is hidden in who God is and in your relationship with Him. That's what Eusebius says. Well, there's more to this inability. It's like this. It's like Paul has this aha. He says, we live in this world. It's like a desert in terms of real life. In terms of real life. This fallen world is a place where things suffer and die and there's no hope and it's just like a wasteland. And so I think this aha moment comes to Paul when he's talking about this because he stands back and says, this is an astonishing thing. Think about Ephesus in particular with Timothy being there. Ephesus is the pagan center of the world. One of the 7 wonders of the world is the temple to Diana. That's in Ephesus. It's a massively corrupt pagan temple, prostitutes prowling the streets at night. I mean, it's corrupt. And you go into a place like that stinks and dies, and it's just horrible. And somehow in the midst of that, you have people like the overseers and the deacons, people who don't think of themselves all the time, who serve other people out of love. Where do these priceless people come from? Because this place is dead and rots. And yet, in the midst of that, we see life in isolation. And this is why he's having this megos moment. He's going, this is just astonishing. As I look across the pagan world that I've been through, Paul's thinking, God raises these people up who are followers of Jesus, and there's life in the middle of death. This is astonishing. You ask anybody, he says, ask anybody that this is just an incredible, megos, awesome thing, that life springs up out of junk and despair and horribleness. How does that happen? So in a sense, it's like that first metaphor we used. It's that first metaphor. How is it that you can see this kind of life spring up in the lives of people across all the pagan, junky, toilet level paganism that's in the world? How is it that you see real life come out of that? How is it? This is a mystery. Not unknown, but it's just a remarkable thing. It's a remarkable thing. And I think as Paul's thinking back on his admonitions about the overseers, the episcopes, and then the deacons, he's looking at that and saying, these are like green sprouts of life, these people. God is creating in these people something that's of inestimable value. How does this is a mystery. Everyone agree? Yeah. People who should have no hope of being civil in any way, or giving in any way, or loving in any way. And yet, in the midst of all that junk, here are these people springing up, and I see life. He says, this is a megos mystery. This is just big. You ask anybody, this is big. What? The mystery of Eusebia springing up in the wastelands of the world. Now I'm with you, Paul. Now I'm with you. I get this because we've seen this when people come to Christ. When people come to Christ, things shift and change. And where there was once death, there's life. And life in ways that are sort of inexplicable any other way. I mean, I can't explain it any other way. I've seen people's lives shift in such profoundly green shoots kind of way. I go, wow, where did that come from? Well, we know where that came from. But it's still a mystery. Yes, Steve.
It's a bit like grass being able to break up an old road bed and come up.
Yeah, grass comes out of a roadbed or in places you don't want it to, like between the concrete slabs in your driveway. But yeah. So I mean, this is, if you're grasping what Eusebius is, then this is why Paul calls this a megos. A big mystery that is universally. Ask anybody. Here's what he's saying. You ask anybody about this, and they'll say this is a megos thing. What is it? What we never understood before, which is that when you give your life to Christ, he brings life. He brings Eusebius. He brings wellness as you maintain and continue to cultivate your relationship with God. Okay, I can get excited about that. I am excited. Are you excited? I'm excited about that. Okay, I'm excited about it. That's what he's getting at. A few more verses. 2 Timothy 2. For people will be lovers of self, having the appearance of godliness, but denying its power. Avoid such people. Okay, look, did you hear that? Oh. So they have the appearance of godliness. Well, yes, I do everything right. Oh, I'm wonderful. I love people. Right. But they're just putting it on. And how are they putting it on? They're denying its power. There is a power behind Eusebius in people's lives. This is a hint we didn't have before. So we know it's something about behavior, or something about the routine part of life, something you can train for and pursue, something that brings wellness. But there is a source of power for this, which gets at our problem I was talking about before, about that I can't seem to muster success all the time in how I choose. I want to choose God and God's idea of wellness for me, not other things. How do I do that? There actually is a power behind it. And this adds to why there's a mysterion, why there's a mystery about this, is that the green shoots of life that come up out of us who follow Christ, that was unexpected, it's there. And it's not something we did ourselves. It comes from some other power. Because some people try and fake it, but they deny that there's a real power behind the genuine one. You have fakers of Eusebian, which is basically people who act like they're godly. And then you have people who genuinely, it wells up from inside from some source of power. Okay, that's good news. Keep thinking power. Look at this. Peter writes in 2 Peter, his divine power has granted to us, past tense, all things that pertain to life and godliness. Woo! Through the knowledge of him who called us to his own glory and excellence. His divine power has already granted to you everything that pertains to life and Eusebius. Why are you not excited about that? I'm excited. I'm excited about this. So this wonderful quality, this behavior in life, this Eusebius, this wellness that's rooted in your worship and relationship with God, he has given you the power already to participate in that. Yes, for life and Eusebius. The benefits of walking with God in this life, the transforming wellness that he brings to this life, he's already given you. And notice that it depends upon, see the second half of this verse? It depends upon your knowledge of him who called us to his own glory and excellence. That's basically just coming back to the idea of me in a daily way, coming back and understanding who God is, spending my time with him, understanding him in his word, relating with him, kind of cultivating that relationship. And in cultivating that relationship, wellness results. This is exciting. We never talk about this in the New Testament. We talk about salvation a lot, and that's really important. We talk about justification and sanctification. Those are important. But what about the whole topic of the fact that once you come to Christ, there's a wellness in our lives that was never there before? That's true. And we see this routinely. We were talking this last week as we were looking back on some of the interviews with Earl Erskine that we do, the ex-Mormon files. It's such a marvelous collection of people telling firsthand stories, no fakes, just firsthand stories of how they've come to Christ, and in coming to Christ, Eusebia happened. Where all of a sudden things were different, where there was a wellness that there was never a wellness before. And they talk about this, and Earl asks the same questions of these people over and over. We could put a robot in for Earl. I mean, he says, so what was your life like before? And you describe that. And then how did you come to Christ? Now what's life like now? And then when you get to that third question, what's life like now? Eusebia. Eusebia. It's all over the place. And it's an exciting thing to see how God transforms people in the now, in the process of on our way to heaven, but in the now. And Jesus would not have stopped and healed people if he wasn't trying to say, I can fix the now to a certain degree, right? Now, I'll caveat that a little bit because he doesn't seem to fix everything in the now. I was thinking that I was reading this. He fixes a lot of things, and as we appeal to him, he does. Even Paul himself said in another letter, he says, I got this thing, this thorn in the flesh. You can hear his frustration when he writes it, and God hasn't taken this away. And I pray over and over, God, take this away. I need Eusebia in this part of my life. I need wellness here. And he says, I pray over and over again, and God just coming back with, nope, my grace is sufficient for you. Nope. So there are some things in the whole picture of Eusebia that he's not going to fix, and he's got his reasons, and maybe he'll explain them someday, but we can't force him to explain them now. And they're irritating to us. And I mean, we can paint our own picture of what Eusebia ought to look like. God, I can tell you what wellness for me is. I'll give you a list. And God sort of chuckles and says, well, that's not a bad list, but I'm going to leave some of those things on your list, and I'm even going to give you some Eusebia that you didn't even know you needed or wanted. How about that? Yeah. Okay. So that's different. So there's a power behind this, and he has already given us all this stuff. So clearly what he's talking about in Eusebia is the fact that there's life in an area that's surrounded by death. There's wellness that defies the ongoing decay that we live in. There's power given to thrive in this place because there's power behind Eusebian. There's also power that's not our own, which is good news. And there's power of rebirth, ongoing rebirth. Not just once, but ongoing rebirth, a rebuilding. And we still haven't gotten to most of the verses for this morning. Because I want you to get as enthusiastic as I am about Eusebius, this whole idea of life with Christ on a daily basis. Well-being coupled together with active worship of who he is. And active worship of who he is doesn't mean you walk down the street singing hymns. I've done that. People stare at you. But it's more the fact that when you see something great happen in your life, something that you would categorize as Eusebian, it's a wellness issue. Someone who's in a relationship with God instantly goes, God, that has come from you. I want to thank you for that. And it moves into thankfulness really quickly. Sometimes just into praise. That can lead into the songs and stuff like that. But also things that I don't have, that are on my Eusebius list that I don't have, I'll say, well, God, that's yours to give or not to give, but I'll be content with what you've given me because what I have is more than I could ever hope for. There's a great word that's used in Passover Seders. If you ever get invited to a Passover Seder, there's only one song in a Passover Seder that you will remember the melody to because it's pretty junior high-ish. And it's around this word Dayenu. Dayenu, 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 Dayenu. You come away going, hey, Dayenu. What's Dayenu? Well, when you listen to the verses of the song, Dayenu means, God, that would be enough. That's enough. I mean, you've given me so much, that's enough. And as you sing through the song of Dayenu, it talks about, well, God, if you had, you got us out of Egypt, and we're there out free from the Egyptians. And God, if that's all you ever did for us, that would have been enough because that was huge. But you got us across the Red Sea and you killed all the Egyptian army. And God, if you'd stopped right there and that's all you did, that would have been enough. I mean, that's just like, that's more than we could ever hope for. But you took us into the desert and you fed us and watered us every day. And you know what? That's so incredible. If you stopped right there, that would be enough. That would be Dayenu. So Dayenu is this idea that what God has given you, it's so much that I can stop today and say, God, that's plenty for me. I'm not going to sit here asking for more because you've done so much for me. I have so much Eusebian because of what you've done. I'm full. And God says, okay, let's do more. So God blesses your life. That's Eusebian. And contentment should be part of that. Okay, so what's the mystery? The mystery is the fact that God brings life. That's really simply what Eusebian. He brings wellness into your life. But the question in the mystery is, how is this possible? How is this possible? So Paul can't just have this pause and say, isn't it incredible? It's Megos, everybody. Ask anybody. It's Megos. The mystery of Eusebian. Woo! He doesn't stop there because the question is how is that possible? Now, in the mystery, See, this is the mystery part that you know. And this it was not previously known. The mystery is made known. So now he's going to launch into what was probably an old poem or an old hymn that says it very clearly. It says, this is why we experience Eusebius in our life. And that's what he goes to next. How is it possible? He was manifested in the flesh, vindicated by the Spirit, seen by angels, proclaimed among the nations, believed on in the world, and taken up in glory. And that's how Eusebian is possible. Wait, who's he talking about? He didn't use a proper word, noun. What? In fact, the beginning of this, that word he is not there. It's an article that can either mean which or who. Well, what is it? Which or who? Well, it depends on what it's next to. What? This is why we think it was taken out of a poem or out of a song, where in the previous verse it says we're talking about Jesus, but clearly he's talking about Jesus, right? I mean, or he could be doing a little double meaning. He could be saying that Eusebian itself is also part of this picture. The wellness of walking with Christ comes from Christ, and they're kind of tied together. But we're talking about Jesus. Look what he says. He says, whoops, I'm getting too excited. I'm knocking my microphone out. He says that which or who was manifested in the flesh. Who was manifested in the flesh? Jesus, the Son of God. Yeah. So manifested, and manifested tells us he came from someplace else and was manifested. And Jesus says that himself, I come from above, you come from below. Blah, blah, blah. So clearly Jesus is bringing us something for well-being that has to come from someplace else. He manifested in the flesh. He manifested in the flesh. He was vindicated by the Spirit. What in the world? Now look, you got to stop and look at this stuff when it doesn't make sense to you. It's a good translation in English. Vindicated in the Spirit. Well, vindicated just means that you make an assertion that somehow is then validated some other way. That's what vindication is. So Jesus came making assertions about the fact that he was the Son of God, that there's life in his name. And especially, there's ways to interpret this, but especially when you get into the first century church, into Acts, where the Holy Spirit is so prevalent, and you see this happen, this life and this renewal and this rebirth in the new church. It's as though the Holy Spirit comes after him and says, I'm doing everything Jesus said was going to happen. So who Jesus claimed to be was validated, was vindicated, was proved by the dynamic influence of the Holy Spirit. I mean, he just proved everything Jesus was saying. So it's kind of like that. Jesus made big claims. There's many ways to interpret that. Seen by angels, well, it's just Paul's way, or the church's way, of saying that Jesus isn't just some human dude who walked around. He actually has recognition in all the heavenlies. Angels had a pretty high reputation in the early church, probably a little too much. When you read Hebrews, you see that, But what he's saying is that Jesus isn't some Johnny-come-nightly. He's someone that the angels watch, is what this means. Wow, big deal. So, seen by angels, proclaimed among the nations. Did that happen? Absolutely. And that's what we're talking in the context with Timothy. Proclaimed to the nations. Proclaimed specifically, not just in Israel. That's what he's saying. The nations here, he's implying the goyim, which is the Hebrew word for everybody else. He said, proclaimed among even the non-Jews. Oh, that's the megas mysterion of the Gentiles, is what that is right there. Oh, okay. So proclaimed among the nations, not just the Jews, and believed on in the world. Oh, and this is how Eusebius then comes to be a benefit of wellness of life, not just to the Jews, but also the Gentiles. And what did they have to do? Believed. Believed. Is that consistent with what Jesus said? Yep. Is that consistent with what Paul said? Yep. Believe. Believe. Believed. The word of who Christ is proclaimed throughout the entire world. After Jesus dies and resurrected and physically doesn't seem to be walking around, but the Spirit is, and people believe on who he is, and boom! Eusebius. Okay? Believed on in the world and then taken up into glory, which is a way of saying he finished the work he came to do. Okay? He came, manifested in the flesh, did what he needed to do, went back to where he came from, and in the process then, the word of who he was spread, people believed, and this is what happened. So when you talk about the mystery, the mega mystery of Eusebius. How is it that life can sprout in a wasteland of fallen humanity? And when we talk about wasteland of fallen humanity, you know anything about pagan Rome? Pagan Greece? Ugly, 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 ugly. How do you have little sprouts of godliness, of people who love coming out? How is that possible? It's possible because Christ himself came from another place, brought the answer, lived amongst us, manifests like that. He's not just a Johnny-come-nightly. He's someone who's planned from the beginning of time. He came at the right moment in time. And then he went back, taken back up in glory. And now the word of who he is propagated outside of Israel in the entire world. And people believe. And then there's life. There's Eusebius. It's all because of what Christ did for us. Paul doesn't say the answer to Eusebius is what we have to do and struggle to do. In fact, Peter says it's already done. The power to do it is already done. It's already there. It's already there. And taken up into glory. This is Jesus. So really, kind of as we bring this to a close, this is not a bad picture. Because Jesus said in John 10, when he was talking about the shepherds, the good shepherds and bad shepherds, he says, I came that they might have life and have it abundantly. That's Eusebius. Life now, well-being now. Now that's a bonus and plus on top of our salvation of life with him even in eternity. But that's like right now. Like right now. You mean life can change right now if I simply believe in who Christ is and I follow and worship him on a daily basis and I make him the integral part of my entire life?
Yes.
Yes! Thanks, Linda. Here we go. I'll pay you later. That was a $5 yes. But yes, and that's why Paul, when he starts out this line, is so enthusiastic. That's why he's so enthusiastic. It's a mystery that we never thought would happen with the Messiah. We knew the Messiah was going to come as Jews to save us from the oppression of the bad guys like Rome or whoever it was. But we never had a clue that the well-being that he would bring would be something more internal and something more genuine and something we didn't actually have to earn, that he would sprout up life inside of us and it would defy all odds inside the culture. Where does that person come from that they act like that? That Eusebius is striking up everywhere here. And by the construction of the word, it looks like all we need to do is just be mindful in our worship of who God is in everyday moments. And he's intended, and you cannot stop him, to bring wellness in your life. Well, that's incredible. I know, Paul says. I told you it was. It's megas. It's megas. Now, today, I sort of hate it. Scientifically, we know how this works. But we don't totally know why it works. We know what happens in great detail, but we don't know why you take a seed and you put it in the ground and it decides to wake up. In fact, I dare say there's theology in everything God created for us to look back and go, hey, you know what that reminds me of? So really, Eusebius is this extraordinarily wonderful thing that God has intended for you. Wellness in being in relationship with him. And your relationship with him is fundamentally a worship one in every moment. You walk with him all the time. There's a famous story by this guy, and not a story, a biography of this guy named Brother Lawrence. And Brother Lawrence is well known, 300-400 years ago, I can't remember now. But he became somewhat popular to the degree you could become popular 400 years ago, because of his ongoing relationship with God. He's seen as a very godly, very spiritual man, just consumed with God in so many ways. But he wasn't really... He wasn't officially a leader of any congregation he was really sort of a nothing, but he became legendary. So someone wrote a book to try and catalog his life to find out what his secret to this was. To his godliness. This is Eusebius. And so they went to this monastery where he lived a very quiet life. And so they came saying, where is Brother Lawrence? Oh, well, I think he's back there someplace, Well, they finally found Brother Lawrence at this place. He's back there peeling potatoes for dinner. And they're trying to say, what is your secret? What is your secret to Eusebius, basically, to such a life of well-being with God? What's your secret? And he continues to peel the potatoes, says, well, you're looking at it. And he goes on and describes about the fact, it's not about service. It's about the fact that in everything I do, I'm in communication with God and thanking him for everything that he gives me. I'm constantly in contact. I'm worshiping him in every context of what I do. It's not a matter of me doing anything super spiritual in an artificial sense. It's a matter that I include God into every single aspect of my life and I worship him as I go. That's what it is. Here's a potato. You want to peel? So it's a fascinating story because that is the key, in fact. Eusebius is all about the key of worshiping in the moment, every single moment of the day. And that doesn't mean artificial worship. That means just relating to God in everything you do. Contentment and thankfulness and asking him and being in constant communication. Like Paul says, I pray without ceasing. That's what he's talking about. And then in that process of you pursuing and training yourself for that relationship with God on a moment-by-moment basis, you find life where there was no life before. You find you wellness. You, not you. You, Eusebius, wellness. You're fine. That's what Paul's trying to get at. And that is the most remarkable of mysteries in the entire New Testament. Man made new now. Now. Someday those things on your Eusebius list that he is not doing, he's kind of dragging his feet on, someday we will have a new body altogether and all that list will be taken care of. So don't worry about that. But in the meantime, as he unfolds the wellness in your life, point by point, worship him for his great loving kindness and his gratefulness. Just what he does that you never deserved. You were living in a land of dried skulls and a wasteland and a hard crust, like Doug says, but he can bring life into you and you can break through that because the power he put in you already for rebirth. Now, are you enthusiastic now?
Yes.
Yeah, I am too. I go back and I read that phrase and I go, I'm jazzed. I'm with you, Paul. You know what, Paul? Ask anybody, he says in the beginning. You can ask me too. I'm enthusiastic. I am. Okay, we need to quit. We're going to sing this Ancient of Days because this has been God's plan from the very beginning of time, which is to bring wellness to mankind through relationship with him. Father in heaven, we thank you for your great love toward us. And Lord, as I go back and I look at the various aspects of the wellness that you've brought into my life, things that I never deserved, things that I wasn't even pursuing in many cases, and yet there it is. I think about the fact that you are a kind and loving Father who's bent on our wellness, on our good, in ways that we even as ignorant little children don't even know to ask for. And Lord, as I think back as well, I think about the sweet times we've had together as we've walked in different places, as the contentment of my heart overflowed for you and stopped asking, realizing that you've given so much that, you know what, if you could stop right now and that'd be Dayenu for me. That really would be enough for me. But you keep going. Your grace toward us it is sovereign. We just can't fight against it. It comes anyway. And you continue in your love to overflow toward us. Forgive us when we whine and complain and add to the list what you have not added to the list. And Lord, focus our hearts and our minds on gratefulness and contentment on what you have. And a deepened moment to be able to come to you and say, you are so good to me. You are so good to me. Lord, I find wellness. I find Eusebian in just what you've done for me. And I never deserved it. It's a megas mystery that I'm enjoying, exploring, and uncovering as every day goes on. So thank you for your great love for us and all you do for us. And Lord, increase our enthusiasm to be the same as Paul's. So thanks for this great word now. In Jesus' name, amen.